So this is the morning routine. This is going to take each of your joints through its available workspace. What we're looking for is to make sure that the joint can move without compensation from other joints. So Patrick's first going to start by going to his neck. So we're going to work breath in and bracing, starting at his abs and slowly letting it spill out to the rest of his body, just 30%. He's going to first start by segmentally tucking his chin all the way down to his chest. It will then rotate to the right, so he's scraping his collarbone with his chin. He'll side bend towards the right, extend his head, and now he's starting to rotate only from his cervical spine, making sure that nothing else is moving. So from his shoulders down, he's acting like it's stuck in cement. He's avoiding any pinch points, so if he were to rotate and side bend towards his left and feel a pinch point there or any type of sharp pain, he would either make the circle smaller or he would work on avoiding that pinch point. So he would go right up to the point of pain and then just reverse, so that way he's avoiding it. Still making sure that he's maintaining that tension. We're watching out for any hip motions, any shoulder motions while he's going through his cervical motions. So from the side view, what we can look at is make sure that his back is not arching at all, that his hips aren't moving, as well as no shoulder motion while he's going through his full cervical range of motion. Again, trying to avoid any of those pinch points, the range of motion entirely pain-free. So he'll go through 2 repetitions each way, making sure that he's expanding that circle each time. Good. Rotation all the way to the right. Bring that chin down and back to the middle. So these are now the shoulder blade controlled articular rotations. Patrick's going to have his arms out. He's going to try to make sure that his arms are straight the whole time. He's also doing that same irradiation, so he's going to give a small brace starting at his abs, slowly letting it spill out to the rest of the body to make sure that he's not compensating. He'll work through some retraction, so he'll bring his shoulder blade closer to his spine. He'll go through elevation, so that way they go up towards his ears. He's going to protract forward, depress down, and then retract again, and then he'll go into that same range of motion. So at first you can kind of make it look like a box, then you can start to smooth it out over time. Some common compensations that we're looking for here is that if his elbow starts to bend when he starts to do the retraction, if he's getting any extra head or neck motions throughout these, or if he's using any of his body to rotate in order to accomplish the range of motion. Okay, so we're looking out for that elbow compensation. So if he starts to bend when he retracts, we're also making sure that he's not getting that trunk rotation. He's not getting any forward head movement or any type of side bend with his cervical spine throughout the range of motion. So if he finds a point that he's weaker at, he can spend some more time in that range of motion to smooth out that motor control. So now for the shoulder controlled articular rotation, he's going to start by giving that abdominal brace and slowly letting the rest of his body brace to about 30%. He's going to start with that external rotation. His arm's going to try to stay straight the entire time. He's going to bring his arm across the body as far as he possibly can, making sure that elbow doesn't bend. He's going to go all the way until he gets to shoulder flexion. When he hits that first barrier, he's now going to imagine that he's wringing out a towel, going all the way into that internal rotation and extension behind his back until the back of his hand is next to his side pocket. He'll then reverse until he hits that first roadblock, fully wind out into external rotation, and then all the way across back to his starting point. And then we'll go through for rep number 2. What we're looking for is to make sure that his elbow doesn't bend, that his wrist or hand isn't doing any extra motion, as well as some low back arching if he gets up into that shoulder flexion. And when we're in internal rotation, he's trying not to rotate his trunk. If there's any pain with this range of motion, same thing. You can make it just smaller to bypass that pain until you can fix the areas that seem like they're the problem. And then from here, we're looking to make sure there's no low back arching when he comes up into that shoulder flexion. He's doing a good job making sure that his arm is straight. He's rotating all the way into that internal rotation and reverse retracing that path until he hits that first roadblock, externally rotate all the way across and retracing that path from the starting point. Good, and then following through for rep number 2, we're making sure that everything stays braced throughout this. So you're trying to keep just about a 30% brace, especially if we're doing this first thing in the morning. We don't want to have that maximal contraction. So right here is just a nice easy brace, making sure that no other body parts are helping him to get through this motion. Now working on the thoracic and lumbar spine, similar to the neck, he's going to have a brace, making sure that from his hips down are stuck in cement. So he's going to give a 30% brace to make sure that he's not moving his hips throughout this range of motion. he's going to segmentally flex forward all the way until he gets to his basement. He's then going to imagine where his belly button is. He's using that as a guide to rotate towards his right without his left hip coming forward. He'll then drop that right shoulder, come into extension, and then start to rotate towards the left, drop that left shoulder, and then segmentally come forward back to the beginning. Same thing, he'll go back towards the left side using those lower abdominal muscles, side bending to the left, extending, rotating to the right, dropping that right shoulder, and segmentally coming forward until he gets back to the beginning. What we're looking for here is to make sure that the hips don't shoot forward when he's going into that extension, as well as they don't shoot back when he's going into flexion. So he's trying to get just from his waist up to get the motion to do as much of that rotation, side bending, extension, and flexion. Good. And follow all the way through. So he's going to flex forward segmentally. Same thing, making sure that from his hips down, they're not allowed to move, and he's getting all of that segmental work through his spine and expressing the full range of motion. Another way that you can kind of limit the compensation from the hips is if you spread your legs further apart. That will decrease the amount that the hips can help. For the elbow, he's going to start with that abdominal brace. So he'll take that deep breath in. He can hold his fingers right next to that elbow joint to make sure that he's getting rotation from the elbow joint and not from the shoulder. So while he's doing it, he'll start palm up, he'll get to the top, and then go palm down. So we're making sure that rotation is coming only from the elbow joint and making sure that his shoulder is not helping with the motion. He'll then reverse and go palm down all the way up to the top, and then he'll reverse coming all the way down. So he's expressing that full range of motion with pronation and supination of that elbow joint, while we also get flexion and extension. And from the side view, he's making sure that he's maintaining that brace throughout the whole body. He's going through that range of motion all the way up into flexion, and he's making sure he goes all the way down into extension. He'll then reverse, keeping that palm down, fully supinate, so that way we go palm up, and going through that full range of motion, elbow bending, all the way into elbow straightening. For the wrist, we're going to start with the elbow and about 90 degrees here. You're imagining that there's a phone on your forearm, so that way if you start to twist, the phone or the object would fall off of your hand. So now you're going to start with that abdominal brace, flexion, bring it out into radial deviation. He'll extend the wrist and now bring it into ulnar deviation, and then he'll reverse. So he's making sure he's not getting any excess motion from the fingers, and he's trying to keep the hands as flat as possible, as well as the forearm without any twisting. So he's still maintaining that full body brace, about 30%. He's watching to make sure that forearm isn't twisting at all. So he's keeping that imaginary object on his forearm and expressing all the range of motion of the wrist. So he'll work on flexion, extension, radial deviation, and ulnar deviation, making sure that all of it is coming from our wrist joint and our fingers aren't helping. Still imagining that imaginary object while he goes through that full range of motion. So when working on the fingers, we're going to work on the individual fingers themselves and them expressing their full range of motion. So he can start with the index finger, giving 2 big circles in each direction. For a little bit of tactile cueing, you could put your fingers on the knuckles to make sure that movement is coming from this knuckle. And we'll go starting at the index finger. You can move towards the middle finger, then towards the ring finger, pinky finger, and then the thumb. What we're trying to make sure is as he moves his fingers, if he's able to move the individual finger without other ones helping out. Is making sure, again, no other fingers are allowed to move but the one that he's working on. And he's making sure he stays slow and controlled throughout that full range of motion. So for the hip-controlled articular rotation, he's going to use his left hand to make sure that he doesn't have to balance and he can stabilize. He's going to take a deep breath in, brace from his abdominals, and slowly letting that contraction spill out, still staying at that 30%. He's going to first work on externally rotating his right leg, making sure that it comes all the way up until he hits that first roadblock. He'll then come out into abduction. From here, we'll go into that internal rotation and extension as much as he can, and then he'll reverse. So he'll come back into extension, open back up, bring the leg back across, and retrace that path. What we're looking for here is to make sure that his left knee is not bending when he goes through this, that he's not rotating the trunk when he comes out into this range of motion of bringing that leg out to the side, and that when he goes into extension, he's not arching his low back to accomplish the motion. Good. He's retracing that path. Going into that external rotation, bringing it all the way up into flexion. He'll go into that abduction. He'll rotate inwards and start to extend. And we're watching out to make sure through that extension that he's not getting any extension of that lumbar spine and everything is moving through the hip here. He'll pass through for one more rep, making sure that he's maintaining that 30% tension throughout just to make sure that he's not getting compensation from other joints in his body to accomplish this hip range of motion. Working on the knee-controlled articular rotations, what we're looking for is internal and external rotation of the shin or the tibia. We can do this also by making sure that the femur itself doesn't help. So the way he can do that is wrap his right arm underneath, grab onto his left bicep, and then bring his left arm over the top. So we're giving a choke hold to that thigh. He'll work from here, working on external rotation. So he'll shift his tibia out to the right, and then he'll extend right before he locks out. And now he'll internally rotate and then flex as much as he can. So each time he straightens and bends his knee, he's fighting for more of that rotation and thinking about shifting through that tibia to make sure that we can express as much range of motion. He'll go all the way in shy of lockout, and then he'll bend. So now he'll do two that way, and he'll reverse. So he'll keep all of that internal rotation, start to extend. Now come out into that external rotation and flex. Same thing. So each repetition, he tries to squeeze out more rotation and come out into external rotation and bend as much as possible. So now looking from the side view, same thing with the knee. We're going to work on external rotation of that tibia, starting to straighten, going right before the lockout, because once we get to the lockout, now there won't be any rotation that can happen from the tibia. So he's making sure right where that kneecap is, he's making all of that rotation, rotating inwards and bending. He's still maintaining that abdominal brace, that 30%, and he'll keep that same internal rotation, rotate outward, and then start to bend. Good, same thing. He'll go into internal rotation, straighten the leg just shy of that lockout, external rotation, and flexion. So now we can stay in that same grip for the ankle. He'll make sure that his shin is not moving at all, and we're going to express full range of motion for the ankle. So he'll come all the way up to toes towards his face. He'll then work on bringing the foot inward, and then he'll point as much as he possibly can, and then bring the foot outward, and then come back up. What he's making sure is that the shin doesn't move at all. He's trying to get more range of motion coming from the heel as opposed to the toes doing all the work. He can then reverse, and then going out, down, in, and back up. Same thing, expressing as much range of motion as he possibly can throughout that circle without additional joints helping. And still with the ankle, we're looking from the side view now, and he's going into dorsiflexion, so it's going to bring up towards his face. He will then work in towards inversion, pointing down into plantar flexion, eversion, and then back up and going through for rep number 2, making sure that he's maintaining that abdominal brace, spilling out through the rest of the body, so that way we can only get the ankle moving and making sure other joints are not helping us through this range of motion. And passing through for rep number 2. So now when we look at the individual toes, he'll still maintain that 30% brace starting at his abs and slowly letting it spill out to the rest of his body. He'll first work on lifting up just the big toes without the little toes helping at all. We're also making sure that he doesn't move his foot in or out to achieve the range of motion. So he'll work on doing reps of just the big toe lifting without the little toes. And now he'll keep the big toes down and lift just the little toes, making sure that that foot doesn't collapse inward. And each time he tries to get the toes up just a little bit higher. And then last rep. And now what we'll do is we'll lift all the toes, and he's going to try to put down just the big toe without the little toes helping. So he's going to press down, making sure that the feet don't collapse inward. And last one. And now for the little toes, we'll keep all the toes up, and he's going to piano key them down, meaning his pinky toe all the way down to his big toe are going to work. So he's going to try to get the 5th toe down and then working slowly until he gets to the big toe, separating out each time, trying to make each range of motion as big as possible. And now looking from the side, he's going to do the same thing and having just his big toes raised without the little toes helping at all, making sure that the foot doesn't collapse inward. And I'll go for one more rep. And now he'll keep the big toe down, lifting up the little toes, and watching for any type of rolling of the foot while he does this. Each time he tries to get a little bit higher with that repetition. Now he'll lift all the toes up and now put down just the big toe without the little toes helping, or watching for that foot not to collapse inward while he does this to achieve that range of motion. And the last one he'll do is keep all the toes up, and he'll try to individually put down that pinky toe all the way down to the big toe, making sure the foot stays flat the whole time and we're not getting any rolling to achieve any range of motion. All right.